Albury became a city in 1946-47. What did it mean to become a city? A Proclamation Day editorial in the Border Morning Mail declared this a threshold moment. The celebrations were part of a ceremonial rite of passage in which Albury advanced its claims on being a city. They had revealed a love of British pageantry, a self-congratulatory assertion of social cohesion, and claimed a new, wider cultural life which gave access to city-like lifestyles. Albury's cultural life differed little from that in other country towns in New South Wales and Victoria. Residents played, watched and listened to football in 3 codes. They formed strong tribal allegiances to Melbourne football teams. They enjoyed racing horses, greyhounds and pigeons. Yet the newspaper insisted Albury people were no longer country hillbillies. Albury was something more than a country town. It was becoming citified with a wider, more refined culture. Through the 1940s, Albury gathered the facilities to host regional swimming carnivals and bowl competitions, and tennis tournaments that featured Australian and overseas champions. Albury residents sang what were still called hillbilly songs. They stood to hear local renditions of the Hallelujah Chorus. They joined in community singing with piano accordions. They went to lively political meetings. Young women and young men joined church and service clubs, and where they engaged in community activities for the common good. Albury's new, wider culture provided the serious-minded with access to a community college, art exhibitions, and classical music concerts. Nevertheless, most residents, here as elsewhere, enjoyed evenings with radio or reading, venturing out occasionally. Nearly all houses had a radio to keep them up to date with news and views and the latest records to buy. With radio they could swoon to Sleepy Lagoon or march with toreadors. Radio created a border district listening community. The ABC's 2CO had local news broadcasts compiled independently from 1947 on. Commercial radio station 2AY had a friendship club which raised money for the hospital. Radio announcers spoke clearly and well, as did the students at Miss Lillian Boy's elocution classes. They did not speak with the broad Australian accents of commercial radio's Dad and Dave and Mrs. Obb's serials. Albury's nightlife included euchre, old-time and modern dances, jitterbugging, and now cabarets in its new basement nightclub. Albury could speak and dress properly enough to enjoy sophisticated dancing to muted trumpets, saxophones, and gentle drums at the Globe Hotel. Mr. Skeen at Mates arranged city-style fashion parades with local and Melbourne mannequins ahead of the new City Gold Cup and ahead of the Sheep Show. The newspaper described the elegant outfits people wore on formal occasions. Sophisticates could dress at Mates for functions at the Globe Hotel or the Gala Coffee Lounge. Women could not wear slacks in the Globe Hotel dining room. Men had to wear coats. The Globe had a specially designated writing room for guests to use. City visitors could tell this was a place of substance. Shopping was becoming more city-like, the city firms took over family businesses. Hire purchase became available on more goods, and the main street moved to parallel parking. Through the 1940s, going to the pictures was a major family outing that involved getting dressed up and perhaps splurging on a box of chocolates. The Regent and Hoyts were well-appointed city-like cinemas, offering relaxing evening entertainment and Saturday excitement. Albury itself even made it onto the film screen, Australia-wide and overseas. The West Motors float in the procession featured chariots with massive Ben-Hur drivers drawn by fractious steeds, advertising a forthcoming chariot race and reminding viewers of the silent film of 1925. People remembered with films, and they thought with films. Films help them reckon the differences between city and country living in American and sometimes Australian terms, and often with lyrics that were reinforced persuasively with music. Gramophone records and sheet music made available the tunes and words of Broadway hits. In the 1940s and early 1950s, Albury radio listeners, then filmgoers, were invited to ponder again the might of Old Man River with tunes and lyrics that stayed with them for a lifetime. Like the cowhand Will Parker of Oklahoma, they could, with rollicking music, wonder the ways everything was up to date in Albury City. Albury City might not have had Kansas City's striptease shows, but it was sufficiently brazen to have female impersonators at its basement nightclub. Albury was big enough, anonymous enough, for its 20 Hoyts billboards to invite custom with risque pictures of film stars on Fry, Sat, Mun, or Chew, Wen, Thur. Albury's cultural life was wide enough to include both the seedy and the respectable. Town boosters insisted that Albury was emerging from the 1940s as a real city in the valley. More sober assessments of everyday life showed procession floats featuring fashionable girls lazing beside the weir did not always match reality. In 1952, Albury City commissioned Bill Bailey to compile a history showing how Albury had emerged from the 1940s. For Bailey, the city's buildings were testimony of its modernity, but he was a pernickety historian. Exasperatingly, he pointed out that while the city celebrated its links with Albury and Surrey, there were 3 Alburys in England, which might be its namesake. He was a diligent Mitchell Library researcher and found the first surveyor's map of the crossing place. Bailey was also a well-practiced municipal historian. He hit on the border as being the distinguishing feature that shaped Albury's past and present. His story of Albury was simply extended rather than changed when it was republished 20 years later. Republication gave it added influence on local understandings of the local past. Bailey's work, like the commemorative events, skated over the challenges of the time. He ignored the small-mindedness and sectarianism of country town life depicted by Alan and Jean McIntyre. He glossed over the radical idea of a Murray Valley River region, and he ignored the changed politics of post-war reconstruction. Bailey ignored the shortage of houses which rural reconstruction researchers like Sam Wadham and Jean Martin, had found blighted the lifestyles of men and women living in the country and country towns. Many families in, as well as near Albury, shared houses. Some turned verandas into bedrooms. Much of Albury was in a frontier stage of suburban development. Progress in progressive Albury was uneven. The political reality was that when city-based state governments allocated commission houses, they favoured Wangaratta and Wagga with their full moons of influence within each state. Bailey's Albury, like that of the 1947 commemorations, was British. But at the end of 1947, the first cohorts of non-British newcomers were beginning to appear in the district. The flotsam and jetsams of Europe's war washed up on the banks of the Murray at Bongilla. Bailey ignored the challenges a host community faced welcoming newcomers from other cultural backgrounds. Bailey explained that Aborigines had been numerous. But as time passed, he said, the natives became fewer. Many moved away, leaving the rich river flats and the grazing land for the white men. Still, Albury residents in 1947 knew of Albert Namatjira the painter, Lionel Rose the boxer, and Harold Blair the singer. They heard claims for equal citizenship coming from downstream at Cumaragunja via Pastor Doug Nichols, the footballer, William Cooper, the political spokesperson, and Thomas Shadrach James, the schoolteacher. Into the 1940s, Riverina and Border District Palmers were still recruiting domestics and mothers' helps from the Aboriginal Girls Training Centre at Cootamundra. A grainy newspaper photo showed how two little Aborigines, in inverted commas, broke from the 1924 human hovel reenactment to play a version of the story. In 1947, dispossession was acknowledged when horsemen rode in the procession with arms for use against the foe, as of yesteryear. Bailey may have paid little attention to the way in which people were inadequately housed, or how the district was being peopled, or had been peopled, but there were in the local newspaper glimmers of acceptance, even embrace of diversity. After the war, the Border Morning Mail became larger and was circulated more widely, creating a border district print community. Reconstruction after the war saw the creation of national, regional and local identities. Place identity then, as now, is shaped by the stories communities tell of their past. The celebrations marking cityhood were a community sing-along, claiming everything was up to date in Albury City. They focused on achievements and passed over challenges. They proclaimed a togetherness. Local radio and the local newspaper ensured Albury emerged from the Second World War with a strong sense of being a border city serving a border community. Together with films, they helped Albury residents understand the advantages and complications of becoming a bigger community, becoming a city in the country, a regional city, sitting beside and eventually astride an old man river.